What happens in Genesis 1 is there's a beginning, and there's God speaking, and there's light in the middle of chaos, and here comes order. And then what does he do on the sixth day? He creates man. He takes dust and he fashions man out of the dust, and he breathes into man, and man becomes a living soul. Right? There's man on day 6. In John chapter 19, John tells a story that none of the other gospels, he says it in a way the other gospels don't say. He goes sort of behind the curtain to an encounter with the Roman Pontius Pilate and Jesus of Nazareth. This is a fascinating little scene. And you get this back and forth between Jesus and Pilate, but before you get that, Pilate drags Jesus out onto a portico, a balcony, to show him the assembled crowd. The crowd's rabid. They've been fired up by the Pharisees and by the rulers of the temple and the synagogue, and they're angry and they're wanting to see some bloodshed on this Friday. And Pilate brings Jesus to the edge of the balcony and makes a statement in John chapter 19, verse 5. He says, "Behold the man." Now, in God's economy of day 1 being Sunday and day 7 being Saturday and day 6 being Friday, and I'm not trying to be silly or give you the elementaries of calendar, but I just want us to understand that the creation event happens, and what does God do on the 6th day of creation? He creates man. And what does God do on the 7th day of creation? He rests. On the 6th day of John's calendar, Pilate brings Jesus out and says, "Behold the man." Christ becomes the created man of Genesis 6th day. Jesus goes to the cross in John chapter 19, verse 30. He hangs his head and he says, "It is finished." And he dies and he goes silent. God gets to the end of the 6th day, looks at what he has created and says, "It is finished." And he goes silent. John is recreating this for you because John wants you to know that on the other side of an empty tomb, where the stone's been rolled away, we're not just dealing with the metaphysics of can a man have reanimated dead tissue. John assumes you're a believer of that, or that you're going to be once he tells you the story. What John wants you to see is God didn't just raise Jesus from the dead. God has recreated the first 3 chapters of Genesis, the first 2 chapters of Genesis. He's placed a brand new man in a brand new world. He's brought him out of a tomb. He's finished the work on one man so he can begin the work on another man. It's the first day of the week at the top of chapter 20. The first day of the week means the 7th day is past. The rest is finished. And now we're moving forward into a brand new creation. I love this. I think what John does here is brilliant, because for those who are watching closely, John's trying to lay out the case that the resurrection is not a happy ending to a story. John's laying out the case that the resurrection is the happy beginning to a brand new story. We don't stop the Gospels with the stone rolled away because it would have been too depressing to have Jesus dead and laying behind the stone. We cease the Gospel with the stone rolled away and Jesus speaking and moving and breaking bread and drinking the cup and touching lives, because in the new creation, that's what it's all about. You see, you've come out of darkness and into light, not so that you can recount where you've come from, although there is utility in knowing where you've come from. My goodness, it helps to be able to look back and realize where you've come from and what you've come out of and what you've grown into. But you're not saved for that. You're not one of the children of God so that it can be all about looking backwards. It's so that it can be looking forward into a new creation, so that you can go do something and be something in a world that badly needs you to come alive. And why is that important? Well, it's important because what Jesus does, or what John does rather, is echo Genesis, and from Genesis on, we see the great divine pursuit of God with man.